everyone. A very warm welcome to today's session. I hope you guys are doing absolutely fine and amazingly well. Sat Sri Akal, Namaskar, Bonjour, Adab. So, Bache, this is the second session of our chapter where we are actually studying about how the natives were educated by the Britishers. So, we have done quite a few things in the first session. This is the second one. Today, we are going to talk about what happened to the local schools with the Britishers coming in. But what we did in the previous session will also be revised, so you don't have to worry. Let me quickly introduce myself. Hi बच्चों, मेरा नाम अंकना है और मैं आपकी expert हूँ for social sciences at Imbibe. I come with an experience of more than 9 years in the field of education. I've had the wonderful chance to teach both CBSE and ICSE students online and offline. I have done my studies in the field of humanities and I specialize in English and social science. Now with that, a quick introduction about the chapter also. So the chapter that we are doing is basically civilizing the native and educating the nation. So the topics that we did in the previous session, so basically this chapter can be broadly divided in these three topics where you have the beginning of English education in India, local schools before and during the British rule, and agenda for national education in British India. So we have already done the first one in the previous session, the other two we'll be doing today. The concepts that we are going to cover is basically all of these is what was the local education, what were the pathshalas, how did the pathshalas, the schools look like before the Britishers came and what were the changes that were brought in, what was the agenda of this national education, Mahatma Gandhi's view on the Western education, Rabindranath Tagore's view, Shantiniketan of Rabindranath Tagore and the differences in Gandhi's and Tagore's views on education. All of this we are going to cover today. We'll start with a quick recap of what we have done in the last session. So, bache, we basically learned that earlier when the Britishers came here, from the mid of 19th century, which is around 1850s onwards, there were these bunch of people called the Orientalists who started this whole idea of education in India. Now, when I say Orientalist, what do we mean? People who are scholars into a study of languages, culture. Now, when they started enabling the education system over here, they first went ahead and did the studies of all the languages spoken in India, all the texts in the Indian native languages like Sanskrit, Arabic, Persian, did a translation of those texts, did a study of those texts, and they decided that the texts were very, very rich and had a lot to teach. So, why not to enable an education system in India which will basically teach the people their own history with their own texts. Okay? So, in the 19th century, British officials in India shifted educational ideologies. Orientalists like Jones and Kohlberg, they explored Indian heritage, which was, of course, not approved by all the Britishers. It was later criticized by people like James Mill, who continuously said that it was absolutely garbage, the studies that people were trying to implement with Orientalism. It basically was teaching no life skill, no knowledge to the people, and it made no sense, and there was no exposure to English, which was very much required by the Indians. So, Thomas Macaulay influenced this whole system. He was also a critic of the Orientalist approach. That led to the 1835 English Education Act, which prioritized English medium education. Then we have the Wood's Dispatch of 1854, which enforced European learning's practical benefits and faced opposition from the Christian missionaries advocating moral improvement through Christian education. Then the East India Company initially opposed the missionary activities but later allowed them to do whatever they wanted to do at Serampore. Post 1857, the British government refrained from openly supporting missionary education, fearing a native backlash can happen again against attacking a local belief. So, all of this is what we have done in the previous session. Let's get started with today's topic. So, we'll talk about India's education system has undergone a very long process of evolution and transformation. We are used to how it is now and know about the various factors that have influenced it through centuries. So, we have this system, right, when I'm teaching as a teacher with a blackboard or maybe a smart board or a digital board, whatever, or a whiteboard. The students are sitting, the curriculum that we are following, but where did it start from? This is how pretty much education looks right now to everyone. But what influenced it? What brought it to this level? So that is what, of course, somewhere has the roots in the British time, right? The British rule. But do you know how Indian children were taught in pre-British era? So we see a lot of reflection of what happened during the colonial rule in our present system. But how did the system used to exist before that? That we are going to explore today. How did the schools exist back then? How did they operate? What did they look like? Let's get started and find about that. So local education in the pre-British India. पुरानी इंडिया की बात करें और उस वक्त की एजुकेशन की बात करें तो बच्चे एक रिपोर्ट है हमारे पास which is the William Adams report. We'll have a quick reflection on this. So in the 1830s, a Scottish missionary, ठीक है, he conducted a tour of Bengal and Bihar, commissioned by the company to assess education in vernacular schools. What do you mean by vernacular? Basically the local languages that's spoken. His report highlighted the prevalence and nature of local education, particularly the pathshalas. So even today we call schools as pathshalas, but pathshala उस वक्त जो है was the technical term. So the regular, technical, traditional system in which the schools used to exist were known as pathshalas. So this Scottish missionary William Adams, he did a study on this, and in 1830 he produced the report and told us that what was exactly happening in these pathshalas, how the education, the system was running. Over 1 lakh pathshala is what existed in Bengal and Bihar, which is a lot. Back at that time, for 1 lakh schools to exist just in these two states is no less, right? Small scale institutions accommodating fewer than 20 students. So, of course, now that kind of makes sense. If there were 1 lakh schools, the amount of students that each of them were catering was relatively low, right? Today we have hundreds and thousands of students going to one school. There were earlier 1 lakh schools, but around 20 students per school, per pathshala, per establishment were found. एक स्कूल में, एक पाठशाला में करीब 20 बच्चे जाया करते थे. Yet collectively educating 20 lakh children, right? तो हर स्कूल में भले 20 बच्चे जाते थे, but लगभग 1 लाख पाठशाला होने की वजह से साथ में 20 लाख बच्चों को एजुकेशन मिल रही थी. And again, we are just talking about the Bihar and the Bengal region of present, right? Now, establishments funded by affluent individuals or local communities. Where was the money coming in? How were they building this? Were there earlier private school owners as we have today? Was the government running it? Necessarily, the government was not really running it, है ना? सरकार actually इसको exactly run नहीं कर रही थी. तो कई सारे लोग थे, people who wanted to educate others, people who were working towards it, people who were affluent, who had money, who had influence in the society, who had a certain name. They were funding these schools. ये इन schools को जो है पैसे दिया करते थे. Occasionally initiated by teachers, the gurus as well. तो पाठशाला में जो teachers थे बच्चे, हमें पता है traditionally the earlier schools, the earlier education system, the teachers were known as the gurus. तो कई बार टीचर्स खुद भी कंट्रीब्यूट करते थे, कई बार वो खुद भी इनिशिएटिव लिया करते थे. एक्सट्रीमली फ्लेक्सिबल एजुकेशन सेटअप compared to modern schools. Now at present, if you look at the modern schools, for that matter, even if you look at the schools which were created by the Britishers, you'll find that it is bounded by a lot of rules and regulations. है ना, इन सारे स्कूल्स में हम क्या देखते हैं, बहुत रूल्स और रेगुलेशन होते हैं, ठीक है. और ये सिर्फ रूल्स और रेगुलेशन होते ही नहीं है, इनको बहुत कहीं ना कहीं रिजिड तरीके से अबाइड भी किया जाता है, स्ट्रिक्ट तरीके से अबाइड भी किया जाता है ना, स्ट्रिक्ट तरीके से स्ट्रिक्टली फॉलोड. But back at that time, it was not like that. The system of the schools was pretty simple, pretty easy for students to get through with, right? It was quite flexible to what we have in today's date in terms of rules, regulations, etc. ना ही fixed fees थी, the amount of money that you're paying, charges varied based on parents' income, which is very, very inclusive and accommodating. बहुत inclusive भी है, accommodating भी है nature में, and they're trying their best to do in order to make the education reachable and accessible for as many students as possible. जो भी अपने पेरेंट्स की कमाई के हिसाब से जितनी फीस दे पाए उतनी फीस दे करके आ सकता था स्कूल में. तो आप देख रहे हो कैसे अकोमोडेशन कहीं ना कहीं यहाँ पे एग्जिबिट की जा रही है. Lack of printed books, schools, buildings. Why would you say there was a lack of printed books? But printing has always, of course, printing evolved. It had pretty much evolved, especially during this time, the 1800s. But still, the printed books itself was no less than money. It did cost good amount of money, है ना? तो printed books पहले print कराना, how we have so many publications and certain boards defined today, it was not like that earlier. So there was no defined text first of all, plus even if there was, to get it printed was not an easy job. Then for the students to be able to afford those books all the time was not a very normal regular thing, right? So school buildings, benches, chairs, blackboards, separate classes, roll call registers, exams or fixed timetables, all of these things that we have in the modern day today did not really exist back at that time. There was a shortage of these things and were not always found or found everywhere, so to say. Classes held in diverse setting under trees, in village shops, temples, teachers' home, जहाँ पे भी हो पाता टीचर्स इन क्लासेस को कंडक्ट कराते थे. कभी अपने घर पे करा लिया, कभी मंदिर में करा लिया, कभी पेड़ के नीचे. You might have seen a lot of old movies or pictures in old stories where there's a banyan tree and then the pedestal that has been created around it, the teacher or the students are sitting around and they're studying. Or maybe schools, how is a lot of times shown in villages because of lack of resources. Even in movies in today's date, you may find that students are sitting on the floor, the teacher is writing either on the wall or they have a board near the tree and they're teaching. There's no designated classroom. That is how flexibly the teaching was happening earlier back at that time, even here. मल्टीपल रीजंस थे उसके पीछे. लैक ऑफ मनी हो सकता है, ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा लोगों तक रीच बढ़ाने का पर्पस हो सकता है. इट कुड बी एनीथिंग. Now, oral teaching method was one of the ways in which the teaching was done. If you talk about how the teaching commenced, पढ़ाया कैसे जाता था? Because we are saying, right, that books a lot of times were there, not there, boards were not there, roll call registers were not there. So how were the students exactly reading? कहाँ लिख रहे थे, क्या पढ़ रहे थे, क्या इन्फॉर्मेशन गेज कर रहे थे? So the information used to be within the teacher and their mind. टीचर के पास सारा नॉलेज और इन्फॉर्मेशन होता था एंड ओरली इट वाज ट्रांसफर्ड टू द स्टूडेंट्स. ठीक है, सारा ज्ञान, जैसे अगर मैं भी पीछे से हटा दूं जो भी टेक्स्ट लिखा है और मैं आपको पढ़ाती जाऊं तो आप सुनते जाओगे, आप प्रोसेस करते जाओगे. सो आई विल बी ओरली काइंड ऑफ टीचिंग यू एंड यू विल बी लर्निंग विद दैट मेथड. So that is the method that was used a lot of times, which was of course based on a certain curriculum, which means there was a certain defined set of topics, subjects that were decided that the students were going to learn. और उसके हिसाब से जो भी चीज़ें होती थी वो सारे गुरु, सारे टीचर्स अपने बच्चों को ओरली पढ़ाया करते थे. Absence of class distinctions, all students sat together in one place. So how we have 2nd grade, 5th grade, 10th grade, 12th grade these days, you guys in 8th grade. ऐसी distinction of classes नहीं थी. It was more about learning the skills and the knowledge for survival in life, growing up, being mature and moving on to the next phase of your life after being a child. So सारे बच्चों को ऐसे अलग अलग क्लासेस में या सेग्रीगेट करके नहीं बैठाया जाता था. Everyone would come and sit together and do the learning together. And Guru interacted separately with groups at varying learning stages. So the stage people moved on. For example, this is few topics you have done. I know you already know this. Now I'll move you to the next stage. तो ऐसे ऐसे करके अलग अलग ग्रुप्स बने थे अलग अलग स्टेजेस के और गुरुज हर एक स्टेज वाले लोगों से, हर एक लर्निंग लेवल वाले लोगों से ऐसे ही बात करते थे, इंटरैक्ट करते थे. Now it adapted to local circumstances. A lot of situation influenced how the schools would be, how the conduction of the teaching would be done. Education paused during harvest time to accommodate rural children working in fields and resumed the post-harvest, enabling access for children from peasant families. You can see when we say the system was very flexible, this is what we mean. Today also we have a lot of system of winter vacation, summer vacation, Diwali vacation and this vacation and that holiday, New Year's, falana dhimkana, bahut kuch hai. All of that is there. But the kind of holidays that were given back then at this time, it was not summer, winter vacation. The idea was very simple that education should be accessible to everyone at every point in time. ये चाहते थे चाहे जो भी हो जाए हर कोई educated हो सके. फीस अपने माता पिता की कमाई के हिसाब से भरे, डिपेंडिंग अपॉन द इनकम ऑफ द पेरेंट्स द फीस वाज डिसाइडेड. Similarly, there were a lot of students, और उस वक्त तो बच्चे, most of the people were actually indulged in the primary sector. ज़्यादातर जो लोग हैं वो primary sector, which is farming activities और related activities में associated थे. So the whole idea of pausing the school was dependent on the cycles, working cycles of these families. Peasants कब harvest करते हैं, कब sowing होता है, which means the phases of the year where the peasants are extremely occupied, they need a lot of people to work on their fields, including their children. So naturally the children will always go either back to the fields or their villages, wherever they had to be with their peasant parents, with their farmer parents, to support them with the manual labor. तो इस चीज़ को अकोमोडेट कर सके ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा, इसके लिए जो ब्रेक्स है वो लिए जाते थे कि बच्चा आराम से निश्चिंत होकर के जाए एंड डज नॉट मिस ऑन एनी नॉलेज, पीस, लर्निंग, skill that were being discussed in their absence. So you can say that the breaks that used to happen in these schools were dependent upon accommodation of the jobs and the lifestyles of their students that were mostly part of it, which is so amazing, which is so beautiful. Then up till mid-19th century, till the 1850s, the East India Company, they prioritized higher education, leaving local पाठशाला largely unregulated. तो जो आपका, आप समझ सकते हो, for the age of, let's say till the age of 12 years to maybe 14 years, whatever the students were, they were left alone. इन सारे बच्चों को जो लोकल पाठशाला में जाते थे, the East India Company did not bother to, engage with them, change their style of learning, influence their पाठशालाs, their local schools, their lower level schools. इन सब चीज़ों से उन्हें ज़्यादा मतलब नहीं था, उन्होंने इन सारी चीज़ों पे ज़्यादा फोकस नहीं किया. But then after 1850s, they were majorly focusing on higher education, because these were the people who were next going to become the workers. तो वर्कर्स को इंग्लिश एजुकेशन आ रही है और भी स्किल और नॉलेज आ रहा है, दैट वाज इम्पॉर्टेंट फॉर देम बिकॉज दे वुड हैव फॉर्म्ड अ वर्किंग क्लास फॉर देयर इंडस्ट्रीज एंड ऑफिसेज एंड व्हाटएवर. तो उसमें ज़्यादा घुसते थे वो. बट आफ्टर 1854 द कंपनी ऑल्सो स्टार्टेड enhancing vernacular, the local language education, the lower level education, by putting in some orders, routines, regulations. यानी कि the flexibility was now going to be limited. अब यहाँ पे भी रूल, रेगुलेशन, सिस्टम, ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, स्ट्रक्चरिंग जैसे आज के डेट में होता है, उस वक्त भी इम्प्लीमेंट किया जाने लग गया था. What were the measures that were implemented in order to make these changes? And changes को लाने के लिए क्या क्या steps लिए गए? First of all, they appointed government pundits to oversee multiple schools, ensuring the teaching standards. Now, when you see the pandit word over here, bache, we are basically referring to a guru only, you can say, or basically the teachers back at that time. तो हमें अच्छे से पता होगा कि पहले गुरुकुल system था, और the Brahmins, because of the caste system, were basically the teachers. They would receive the education and they would teach the other people. So they basically picked up these people who were, so to say, the scholars, the teachers, and who would take the responsibility of educating others, and they would examine them. उनको थोड़ा assess कर लिया, एक basic understanding ले ली कि yes, they do have some knowledge, etc. And then they would appoint them as government teachers. So basically what we are saying is the government pundits are the government teachers of present date, जो गवर्नमेंट के द्वारा एग्जामिनेशन असेसमेंट के बाद एम्प्लॉयड होते थे. द आइडिया ऑफ पुटिंग देम ऑन टू द जॉब वॉज टू हैव अ प्रॉपर स्टैंडर्ड टू इंश्योर दैट येस प्रॉपर लर्निंग, सम गुड लेवल ऑफ लर्निंग इज हैपनिंग. what did they have to do? क्या काम था इन पंडित्स का, इन गुरुज का, इन टीचर्स का, इन गवर्नमेंट पंडित्स का? they had to submit reports regularly. How many students are coming to the school? What are they learning? What is the percentage of marks that they are scoring? How the learning in general is going on? They follow fixed timetables and used textbooks. तो अब क्या हो गया? Printed books आ गई हैं. There's a proper book that you have to follow. No more oral education in these schools. ठीक है? तो इनका काम ये भी था कि देखे कि कौन सी बुक्स फॉलो करनी है, बुक्स आ गई हैं कि नहीं, सब बच्चों के पास है कि नहीं. दे वुड क्रिएट टाइम टेबल्स विच मीन्स अ प्रॉपर स्केड्यूल, अ रूटीन, हाउ वी हैव इन टुडे स्कूल. फर्स्ट पीरियड, सेकंड पीरियड, थर्ड पीरियड, ब्रेक, fourth period, fifth period, sixth period, end of the school, like that. A proper schedule they would create. So they were like the headmasters, you can say. है ना? हेडमास्टर्स क्या करते हैं आज के डेट में? हेडमास्टर्स या जो प्रिंसिपल्स होते हैं, their job is to figure out that what will be the schedule, what routines is being followed up, what textbook has to be followed by all the students, वो सारा काम करना, and annual exams conduct कराना. अब बच्चे schools बहुत large scale होते हैं, wherever the schools are at a small scale, जो छोटे schools होते हैं वहाँ पे the principal is always involved in creating the final exam schedule. They have an overview of those things. ठीक है, they are the people who decide how much fees will be paid, what is the attendance, what rules and regulations are being created, and exactly that is the job of the guru over here as well. यहाँ पे भी वही सारे काम करते हुए हम गुरु को देख रहे हैं. ठीक है, what was the result of these changes, and results क्या होता है, जो changes हो रही हैं उसका असर क्या होता है. तो सबसे पहले हमें देखना है कि पाठशाला complying with new regulations received government support through grants. So wherever, in whichever school the changes were brought in, ठीक है, the changes that the Britishers wanted to be brought in, the changes that the shift that the British government wanted to be brought in, जहाँ पे भी ये shift आ गया था वहाँ पे government funds मिलने लग गई थी. सरकार खुद जो है पैसा देने लग गई थी इन पाठशालास को, so that they could develop more, they could teach more students, reach as many students as possible. Non-compliant पाठशालास had no government support, no government aid. तो अगर आप अपने स्कूल में ये चेंजेस होने दे रहे हो तो गवर्नमेंट विल सपोर्ट यू विथ मनी मॉनेटरीली, अदरवाइज कोई पैसा सरकार की तरफ से नहीं आएगा, दे विल गिव नो मनी. Over time, gurus striving to maintain independence struggled to compete with the government aided and regulated pathshalas. Naturally, बच्चे, a lot of students started going to these government operated schools जो सरकार चला रही है, सरकार के द्वारा funded है, would have better facilities, would have government teachers. So a lot of students and people in general started going to these schools. Plus these schools were stronger and better established, है ना, ज़्यादा strong base के साथ established थे, क्योंकि इन सारे schools में teachers and everything जो है properly specifically functional थे because of the money help that these schools were getting from the government. तो जिन स्कूल्स में लोगों ने ये आज़ादी, फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी मेंटेन करने की कोशिश की, एट वन पॉइंट दे स्टार्टेड फेसिंग द चैलेंज. दे स्टार्टेड रियलाइजिंग दैट हाउ द गवर्नमेंट सपोर्टेड एंड एडेड स्कूल्स वर डूइंग बेटर, वर मोर स्टेबलाइज्ड, बट दे वर सफरिंग. एंड देयर वर अ लॉट ऑफ अदर कॉन्सिक्वेंसेज. उसके साथ साथ और भी चीज़ें, इग्नोरेंस इन जनरल इन सोसाइटी, ये सारी चीज़ें भी हो जाती है. और सरकार के अगेंस्ट जब आप रहते हो या सरकार का हाथ आपके सर पे नहीं रहता, द गवर्नमेंट इज नॉट रियली हेल्पिंग एंड सपोर्टिंग यू, इट डज गेट प्रॉब्लमैटिक टू सर्वाइव इन सच अ केस. So now we are talking about the national education that was brought by Britishers in India. What was their purpose? What were their agenda? What did they want to achieve? The early 19th century saw various Indian thinkers emphasizing the necessity for widespread education in India. So, in simple words, people were not formally educated in India. So, now Britishers wanted a formal degree education and process-oriented learning for the people in India. Because these were the future of, of the nation. These people, these children. अगर वो पढ़े लिखे नहीं होंगे और वो फ्यूचर हैं, so the Britishers did have to work with Indians only going forward. They couldn't have brought Britishers to work for them all the time. कि आर्मी में, गवर्नमेंट में, पुलिस में, so many different kind of jobs. They would need a lot of people to work for them. And these people were going to be Indians. So it was going to be super important for Indians to be educated, to be able to carry forward with this kind of work. Some Indians, inspired by European advancements, advocated Western education as a means to modernize India. So there were Indians who felt that, yeah, this system is good, this system is better, Western people are more modernized, they're more smart, they're more learned, and we would want to implement this. हमें ऐसे ही आगे बढ़ना है. They urged the British administration to establish additional schools, college, universities, give more money. तो वो कहने लग गए कि आप अच्छा कर रहे हो, you're doing good for us, why don't you bring more schools, buildings and organizations like this, give us more money to grow this further ahead, और scale up करते हैं और बढ़ाते जाते हैं. Mahatma Gandhi and Rabindranath Tagore, they were very, very prominent, they were these big figures at that time, but they were against the Western education. They were not completely in favor of all these changes and the way it was happening back at that time. They had various views which was in conflict to what a lot of Indians and definitely what Britishers wanted. So let's talk first about Mahatma Gandhi's view on Western education. Colonial education's impact. It created a sense of inferiority among Indians by portraying Western civilization as superior, eroding the pride in their own culture. If you also think about James Mill, which we have read, whom we have read about in the previous session and also revised in the beginning of the session, what did he say? He said that whatever books that people like, earlier, the people like the Orientalists who were trying to profess that, oh, it's very good, the literature is great in India, let's teach the people of India from their own books, from their own old historic culture, etc. What he said was that it's absolutely garbage, it has nothing to teach, all of that is wrong, whatever. What in simple words were they trying to do? They were trying to humiliate, disrespect, insult, and downlook at whatever we had as literature, as our history, as our culture, as our heritage. तो इंडिया के पास जो कुछ भी था या उसके हिस्टोरिकली जो भी रिचनेस थी, the western education was just looking down upon it. It was just saying कि ये बुरा है, ये सेम लेवल का नहीं है, ये अच्छा नहीं है. Western education is great, Western people are great, they are smarter, ठीक है, Indians have nothing. Now what all of this is doing, it is making the Indians feel inferior, low than what they really are. उन्हें अपने ऊपर विश्वास नहीं होता था, अपनी ताकत का एहसास नहीं होता था, अपने इंटेलिजेंस का, अपने ग्रेट हिस्ट्री का, अपनी ग्रेट डिस्कवरीज एंड इन्वेंशंस का. दे वर मिसिंग ऑन दैट, एंड दैट इज व्हाई द सिस्टम वाज नॉट रियली प्रेज्ड बाय पीपल लाइक Mahatma Gandhi, because that was also somewhere pushing the people to believe that the Britishers were better than Indians. They wanted the Indians to believe in themselves, have that self-reliance, self-confidence, and the feeling of nationalism, because only then they could have fought against the Britishers, took a stand against the Britishers. But that was not happening with the system, because when you are a part of a system for very long, like 10 years, 12 years, that's how long we study in schools, you are conditioned to believe a certain thing. आप उन 10-12 साल में एक पर्टिकुलर चीज को मानने लग जाओगे, कंडीशन हो जाओगे, you'll start believing what you're being taught. Then when you come out of these schools, you'll always praise the Britishers and not the Indians, which was not good for the Indians. He believed that it contained poison, it was enslaving, gulami. है ना? The way they were training the students, they will only start following the Britishers, they will be worshipping the Britishers, they'll always feel they are better, they are powerful. So they were making them the victims of being slave, the follower, and having no power of their own of British rule. They were trying to bewitch Indians, they were trying to put a spell on Indians that yes, what is fascinating is London, what is fascinating is the Western world. Indians are there, nowhere even close to it. Making them admire the British rule. And till the point the Britishers, basically the students, the children kept on admiring the British rule, the development, the nationalism couldn't have happened. People couldn't gone beyond that, right? Gandhi advocated for education system that restored Indians' dignity and self-respect. So he simply said, you do teach your way, you do teach English, you do bring modernization, but don't insult Indians. Let them respect their history, their heritage, their culture, their literature. Let them also know the truth that India has not been so low-key as you're trying to show it. He urged that the students during national movement to boycott the education in this institution, signaling Indian refusal to be enslaved. So he clearly said that when the students refuse to be a part of such a system, ठीक है, स्टूडेंट्स जब ऐसे सिस्टम का हिस्सा होने से मना कर देते हैं तो वो इस सिस्टम से बंधने से, उसके गुलाम बनने से भी मना कर दे रहे हैं. वो अपनी आज़ादी क्लेम कर रहे हैं. दे आर क्लेमिंग देयर इंडिपेंडेंस, दे आर क्लेमिंग to be free, and that is what he advocated and that is what he wanted. Okay. Now, further criticism if we talk about, he also highlighted that Western education emphasized was on reading and writing over oral knowledge and practical experience, which was okay. But he criticized the emphasis on textbooks and literacy alone as insufficient for true education. He said, see, there's not a problem that you're using books and you're using a lot of written materials, okay. But you can't just be like books and notebooks are enough to teach children. You need oral education, you need overall development, you need to give more substance to the students to make their learning really holistic. बच्चों को और चीज़ें चाहिए होंगी, बच्चों को और चीज़ें समझनी होंगी, तभी ये learning पूरी holistic होगी. He believed that education should develop both mind and soul. सिर्फ दिमाग बढ़ रहा है, knowledge बढ़ रही है is not enough. They should become better people also. Just having knowledge and being a very bad person, having no moral grounds and ethics, that is also wrong. He advocated practical knowledge. As I told you, right? Just learning and writing is not enough. Do things, do experiments, go ahead, learn life skills that will help you survive, that will help you grow up, earn money, do your jobs. Right, doing crafts, understanding how things are operating, be it a machine, be it a car, whatever it is, fostering a deeper understanding. Bache, just reading will, for example, I tell you how to swim and I'm just making you read. That is not really going to make you learn swimming. I will have to put you in the water and make you practice swimming. That is what is really going to make you learn swimming. So that is what he spoke about, that make people do things, don't just teach them. Just literal knowledge is not going to help everyone grow as a proper individual. He believed that he inspired others to envision a distinct national education system that was aligned with his principles, emphasizing holistic, a complete learning, which of course had Indian languages, practical knowledges, सारी चीजों का एक सम्मेलन होना चाहिए. Similarly, there were views of Rabindranath Tagore as well. So, he had founded Shantiniketan in 1901. There was disdain for conventional schooling, shaped his educational ideas. Okay? So, he was not very much in favor of this. He detested conventional, traditional schooling. He was not in favor of this. He did not appreciate it. He felt it was very limited, restricted, because we see flexibility is not there. And he understood how flexible people were in pathshalas, right? So, he wanted school where children were happy, free. Learning was happening not by putting and curbing people, but how they really wanted to go ahead and be happy and learn new things and develop as an individual. He said that people should be free to have self-learning, self-studies, free from rigid British school norms. These rules, regulations should not forcefully be imposed on the students. Where teachers were also imaginative, creative, making the children curious. Right? When the teacher is doing a lot of experimentation, children want to learn more, they want to ask questions, they want to, explore more and be more creative hence, which was not going to happen with restricted rules and regulations in British learning. He believed in creative learning in a natural setting, like how people were in temples and below the tree. Right, chose a rural location for that reason for Shantiniketan, where he felt that it was going to be a home, abode for peace, right? जहाँ सब ऐसे घर जैसा हो, शांति हो और creative ideas आते रहे बच्चों को इस सारे scenario में भी. Gandhi critiqued Western civilization, the worship, how they worship the machine, industrialization, etc. And he said, modernization is okay, but don't just accept it as it is. It's going to make you into another machine from human. And Tagore aimed at blending elements of Western and Indian's best tradition. So, Tagore is talking about a balance, a mixture, a new system altogether where both identities are made, whereas Gandhiji focused more on just maintaining the Eastern, the Indian identities and not at all indulging anything into that was Western. So, he advocated, and that is why Tagore advocated teaching science and technology along with the art, music and dance that Indians had as their tradition. Okay. So, we see that the system, which was the national education system, was diverse, had different thoughts in different shape, altering the British system to include more sections of society as they were not doing that earlier, as they were restricted earlier, with alternative systems reflecting the true culture. So, this was going to be a blend of the Western and Eastern, more have Eastern elements to it. And the debate over national education kept on happening even after independence, reflecting varied perspectives on its definition and implementation. So, let's quickly summarize what we just did. We spoke about in pre-British era, the local education thrived through decentralization of pathshalas, 1 lakh schools with almost 20 students in each. Post-British rule, there was a shift because company came in. Mahatma Gandhi, Rabindranath Tagore both criticized it. Mahatma Gandhi advocated for fostering dignity and practical skills, and Rabindranath Tagore, he established Shantiniketan himself to have both Western and Eastern education blended. Gandhi opposed complete Western civilization. Tagore wanted a blend of elements of Indian and Western. The educational divergence lay in Gandhi's rejection of modernity and Tagore's emphasis on merging it with cultural heritage. Okay? So, a lot of other sessions are going to be coming up, guys. Please make sure to check out the Embibe app and ensure that you have enrolled for these sessions. And do not forget to check out our Embibe Lens app as well. If you like this session, do like, share, subscribe to the channel. Tell me in the comment section how did you like it and if you have any doubts. I'll see you guys soon. Till the next time, have a great time. Take good care of yourselves and keep imbibing.
Keep imbibing. We believe in you.